What is up, everyone? Welcome back. It is time for Making the Grade. I know it's been a minute since I've been around. We did our fantasy football draft, and before that, it was mock draft Mondays. But we're back for our weekly look at the Arizona Cardinals PFF grades, looking at the patterns, the themes. What are the data telling us, right? What are we seeing? Obviously, it's week one, so we don't have a whole lot to work with. It's a small sample size, as they say, and you need to see multiple weeks to see those patterns emerge. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at the grades and see what might be the beginnings of a pattern, and maybe there's some things that carry over from last season and things like that. So we're going to talk about that, get into it, look at what the grades are telling us from the game. And I think there are a couple interesting things. Obviously, the overall result wasn't what we'd hoped for, losing 34-28. At the same time, this is in a vacuum. This is kind of what we had hoped for this year for the Cardinals, right? That against really good teams, they'd be competitive and have a chance to win, maybe win a few of those. And, the Cardinals, had the ball driving late, down by 6, had a chance to win this game. It's disappointing they didn't. There are some disappointing things that they absolutely have to get cleaned up, if moving forward to be a contender, to be the kind of team we want them to be. But this is year 2 of a rebuild. And, I've talked about this before on Twitter and in the Discord channel. That NFL rebuild, the textbook NFL rebuild, typically is like a 3-year process. First year, turn over the roster, lots of change, a lot of young players play hard, but the team just isn't competitive typically, certainly not winning games at least. And that maybe they're a little frisky. And that's what we saw last year, right? They played hard. They just didn't have the developed talent to win the games. Year 2, you want to see some of those young players start to develop. You want to see some of the system kind of really take hold where players are finding their footing. The defensive players understand what the system's about. They've got some time on task, as JG likes to say. The offense is kind of finding its footing, and but you still have a lot of young players that are getting some experience, and got a few kind of veterans in there. So you expect in year 2 for the team to be competitive, have better results, but you don't necessarily expect them to be ready to be a contender. Year 3 is when there's no more excuses. Year 3 of rebuild, next year, you expect this team to be fighting for a playoff spot and winning games like this, right? So we'll talk about it throughout the season. It was a disappointing outcome, but in the big picture of the rebuild process, this is kind of what we expected, right? That this team would win against bad teams, and against good teams, what we would hope for is they would at least be competitive, and they didn't get blown out, right? In fact, they came out with a lead. They had a chance to win it. So, I know some people don't want to hear that kind of, optimism. But like just stepping back and looking big picture rebuild, they're right on track with an NFL rebuild to be, at least with what we saw from this game. So real quick, say hey, some of the folks are in the chat. We got Robert Moore. Appreciate you being here. Good evening, gents. We got Class of Nasties. Sup, Professor? We got Arthur saying hello. Thank you for being here. If you jump in the chat, if you're here, just say hey and we'll shout you out. But let's get into the grades. Let's look at what happened. We're going to start on the offensive side of the ball. And we're going to start by making an observation that I actually pointed out on Twitter. I tweeted this out. But if you look at it, I'll put it this way. All of the starting offensive linemen were within the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the top 7 graded players. So 5 of the top 7 graded players were the starting offensive linemen. Now, in one sense, you'd like to see more of the other offensive players, up there. You've got Greg Dortch and Kyler Murray also in that top 7. But this is a really good sign, right? The offensive line obviously is a key to what a team does. Everything kind of, builds on that. And this team is going to be built. We've talked about this. They're going to be built to run the ball and keep other teams' offense off the field, or really what they're trying to do is keep our own defense off the field because that's the biggest liability on this team. And, the offensive line in the past obviously has been a question mark, a concern. And there's still been questions going into this. Like, have they done enough is what people ask. And one of the things I've talked about multiple times, in kind of in here on the Discord server and everywhere else, is that offensive line is viewed as a weak link position, meaning what's important is how strong is your weakest link, right? And another way to put it is what you want in the NFL. You'd much rather have 5 good but not great offensive linemen than 2 great offensive linemen and some guys that are below replacement level. or you want to get closer to at least average. You want to be above average, but you want to make sure your worst player is at least average, if that makes sense. And this is a good sign that they're in the kind of, in the right direction with that, right? You have Paris Johnson Jr. moved back to left tackle, led offensive players in terms of his grade, right? So that's a good sign, right? Moving back to his natural position, left tackle. At least in the first game, it looked good. Obviously, it's just one game. Will Hernandez played well for us last year, and again, continues to play well. Then we got Evan Brown, the guy that they brought in. I really love that signing. He was a guy a couple years ago I was hoping they would sign. They brought him this year in. He can play guard and center. Solid, right? 70.9 grade. Jonah Williams, held it down up until the point he got injured, 68.8. Froholt, 66.4. Solid performance. Obviously, though, Beachum, 59.6 isn't great, and he really struggled when he came in. But what we're seeing here is the offensive line is playing well, and they've got Paris Johnson Jr. looks like he's what they're hoping he's going to be. Will Hernandez, we know what he's a solid starting guard. Evan Brown, left guard, was the problem last year. That was the problem, right? And what we see is, at least in week one, he looks like he's fixed that, right? We'll see. We got to see that pattern continue. But we saw last year, Elijah Wilkinson, left guard, was such a problem for us. And he's brought stability. He's raised that floor, right? Jonah Williams, I think there's still some uncertainty about how long about the injury. Hopefully he's going to be back. It doesn't seem like it's too severe. If anyone has any updates, put it in the chat. But, solid performance. And Froholt, they signed him to an extension, and he's been solid. So that's a really good starting point. Now, they need to continue to, build that, right? In terms of, they drafted Isaiah Adams, right? They drafted the tackle out of Texas, or is it Texas? I believe the one who was injured. But they've got, a couple other guys that they're developing. And, if Adams develops the way they want him to be, and they hope he is, and he becomes one of these starting guards, they're going to keep replenishing it and kind of bringing in young guys to kind of develop, to keep that offensive line, going. But this is a really good start, right? I think what Monty Ossenford is doing, his approach to the offensive line, is perfect, right now at this point. I mean, maybe there's little things you could quibble with, but I think he's doing the right thing. He's building this offensive line. They got solid starters right now. They've got some young players to develop. You have to imagine he will continue to draft offensive linemen, at least one a year, you would imagine, based on kind of how they're going to approach it. So I feel like what he's doing with the offensive line, he's got it moving in the right direction. And I think now he can focus on the defense is what they're going to really need to focus on moving forward. But that offensive line, they've got the wheels in motion the way they want it to be. And I think it's just going to, I think this offensive line for years to come is just going to continue being solid. They're going to keep bringing in, they're going to keep drafting guys, developing them, and filling in those spots as guys move on. And I just think we're going to have a solid offensive line for as long as Monty's here. A couple other comments real quick. Thunder, appreciate you being here. Hey, Joe, glad to see you. Good to see you. Appreciate you being here. Robert saying, have they done enough? Not even close. Overall, they've got work to do, no doubt. But the starting offensive line was fantastic, right? As you pointed out, Kyler, over 3 seconds the pocket to throw, right? The offensive line was solid, right? That was a really bright spot. We got Chris Young. What's up? TCR stream football is now formally back, baby. Right. Rambo, thanks for being here. Hey, y'all. Pop in to say hello. Hope you have a good night. Appreciate that. So the offensive line, right? That's the strong point, right? If we look at we'll get the blocking snaps, right? The pass blocking snaps, that kind of brings them all up to the top, right? So again, we know, Beachum wasn't great. But he's a backup, right? When you have to bring him in, that's you expect to drop off. Now, hopefully they need to develop someone besides him, obviously. But offensive line was good. Mizaki Felix, thanks for being here. Too bad defensive line isn't up to task. No, the offensive line needs work. It's better than it was last year, I still think, but it the pass rush aspect, the interior guys, I think, are improved. They still struggled against the run. Some of that was on the linebackers. We'll see that with the grades. But no, the defense, the defense, the offense, I feel like right now with the players they have in the house, the offense, all the players they need to build around for the most part are there. They may add they're going to add a player here and there in the draft. But like the core of the offense is there, right? They just need to develop, let Melvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Wilson can develop Trey Benson. And they'll add a running back here and there. They'll add offensive linemen, maybe add a receiver, but like the major pieces of the offense are there, right? The defense is going to be the thing that needs the attention moving forward, no doubt. So let's look by positions. So let's kind of go with the tight end group, right? McBride, didn't grade particularly well, and some of this, the passing offense just really, was limited, was very underneath. And some of that was, I think, how they were playing defense and two high safeties and such. McBride, didn't have a great game, but we know who McBride is. We believe in him. Tim Fryman, rookie, didn't have a great, he was good in blocking, 72, right? But, everything else, not as much, but that's fine. He's a rookie. Tight ends take time to develop, right? Elijah Higgins had a nice game though, right? He graded at 66.3 and he looked good. Like, and that's, this is a player they got who had been drafted. I think he was a 7th round pick, I believe, from Miami. The 6th round pick from Miami Dolphins. And, they cut him and released him and Cardinals picked him up. They had him last year and, last year, his PFF grade last year was 63.6, was decent for a rookie. He's a converted wide receiver, right? So, it's their tight end room is looking good, right? Like in terms of we know who McBride is. Ryman's going to develop into that pass blocking guy. I've got a whole video on him talking about him. And Higgins is ending up being a nice piece. Like that tight end room is solid, right? Feeling pretty good about that. Now, the receivers aside from Dortch had a little bit of a rough game, right? Dortch graded well, played a lot, 37 snaps. And, if for anyone who's been kind of hoping, that Dortch season would be here, right? Because he's been a player we've loved, right, for years, but he's always been in and out of the lineup or limited in how much they've used him. He hasn't been used to his full potential, right? When he's played, he's popped. It looks like, we knew this. They talked about that they like him coming into the year. And, we saw him used a lot more in the game. And it just really seems like, it's a Dortch season, right? SZN, right? 37 snaps is for a slot receiver in an offense that plays a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets is good usage, right? So he got a lot of snaps, had some nice plays, graded well. So I'm excited to see how he's part of it. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr., listen, this has been talked ad nauseum. He had a rough game. I know there's a whole screenshot of him wide open, which people online, former players have dissected that and said, well, that's a little misleading, right? So, I've seen some of the breakdowns of that. And I definitely don't think Kyler just, botched that or anything, but that's a whole other conversation. But, there was a Marvin Harrison wasn't targeted a lot, but there were a couple targets that, where he didn't, he dropped the one pass that you wouldn't expect that from him. Right. The other one where there was the throw that you could tell Kyler wanted the back shoulder and Harrison wanted the fade. We don't know for sure, I guess, who was right or wrong, but I think it's more likely that Kyler, having been in the offense longer, and being the veteran is the more likely to have been on the right page. We don't know for sure. Right. So there were a couple rookie mistakes, but I'm not worried about that. Like I do think also the defense probably looked to take him out of the game a bit. Right. And they took away a lot of the stuff deep. So, Harrison's going to get his, and he's going to be fine. It was a rough first game, and that's what it is. But, that's the way it was, right? It was a very underneath sort of offense, a lot of running, a lot of stuff underneath, right? Go down here to Michael Wilson, didn't grade particularly well, but he had the, touchdown, and, there was the one pass, though, he really needed to catch on the sideline, going down that he didn't. But we're going to continue to see him develop. So as the receivers go, Chris Moore, Zach Pascal, limited snaps there, that didn't do, they were just kind of 4 snaps, 1 snap. But, the receivers, they'll have their day. Again, Harrison's getting used to the offense. He's a rookie. I'm not worried about him. Michael Wilson will continue to develop. George still love what we saw from him. So, it was a game and a day where the receivers just weren't big part of what happened, right? So we talk about offensive line, tight end, receivers, quarterback Kyler Murray. Listen, he had a solid grade, 75.6. His running grade was 77.2. His passing was 69.3. He looked efficient. He looked comfortable in the offense. I saw a thing on Twitter, a breakdown of like effectiveness in early downs and late downs, and he was more effective, I think, in later downs, third and fourth down, but he was solid. Overall, for week one, I felt good about what we saw from Kyler Murray. I think, he'll continue to get more and more comfortable, but, solid grade from him. And then, looking at the running backs, the running backs didn't grade well. And they got a lot of yards in the game, but Kyler Murray led them in rushing, right? 57 yards rushing. James Conner had 50. Trey Benson 13. Greg Dortch had 4 yards. 124 yards, right? So overall, as a team, they ran well. They ran the ball effectively. But the running backs didn't have a great game, and I think the grades reflect what we saw. They weren't kind of world beaters in terms of running the ball. In terms of the overall rushing attack. But overall, the grades were, they were okay, right? Hit and miss. So a couple comments real quick. Let's see. Pretty big drop off from Williams and Beecham, unfortunately, for sure. Mazaki Felix, our interior line was still too easy to put around and run on process. I mean, it wasn't. Listen, we need the interior defensive line isn't great, but it's better than it was. And Roy Lopez, we'll talk about him, played really well. They still need some guys there, no doubt. But last year it was a lot of replacement level players. This year they've got guys that are above replacement. They may not be stars, but listen, the defensive line, they need pass rush desperately next. That's going to be a next year thing, I think. And they do need to continue to add a defensive line. They, and could use some help at inside linebacker, I think. Or at least to develop some guys there. Robert saying it's almost like week one was a preseason game for the Stars since they didn't play actual preseason games. That Russ was there for the receivers. Yeah, and a lot of people were saying that, and a lot of people have been critical of them not playing the regular or during the preseason. And there's a number of teams that do that. So it's kind of a tough thing going between. Do you let guys get you worry about the injury versus the players kind of having that sort of rust. So there's a lot of debates both ways in that, but yeah, it was a little rusty, but at the same time, let's not lose the fact that this team had a chance to win against a team that a lot of people think is one of the best in the AFC on the road, week one, right? Like, for all the things we want to say about the rust, like in a vacuum, stepping back, like that's not bad, right? That's better than a lot of people expected from this team. So I know it's still disappointing, but yeah. So let's look at the defensive side of the ball real quick. All right. So actually that's special teams I've got there. So that's Buffalo. Where is it? Here we go. Okay. So let's look at the Arizona Cardinals defense. Okay. Now, Mac Wilson had a great game, and he led all players for the Cardinals in grade with an 87.9, right? And he was solid across the board. 87.9 defense, run defense 85.3, tackling 79.7, pass rush 67.5, coverage 64.9. He has been as advertised, right? He was a guy who's coming in to play an inside linebacker, kind of weak side linebacker, but could rush a passer a little bit situationally. And was going to help bring some stability there. And it really seems like, that's something, that we're seeing at least week one, right? Zaven Collins also had a really good grade in everything but pass rush. Now, I do want to talk about this. I tweeted about this, that, Zaven Collins continues to do well in everything except rush the passer. And a lot of people commented, well, he had one sack taken away because of a bad call. And, there was one sack that you could argue was taken away from him. But I would still argue that even with that one sack, he's like, there's still a pattern that the pass rush is something he's still needing to develop, because he had 0 total pressures. This over here is call them his pressures, 0 total pressures. So even if you gave him that 1 sack, he'd have 1 sack and 0 other pressures. And if we look at Zaven Collins, going back to last year, his pass rush grade, last year was 61 point. It wasn't great, right? So I still, yeah, sure, you can argue he should have had that 1 sack, sure. But like this grade, this 57.9, basically what that's telling us is on every other play except for that sack that doesn't count as a play now, he wasn't playing his pass rush like snaps. The 12 pass rush snaps that were not that sack that was taken away weren't great. Okay. Obviously, I'm pulling for Zaven Collins. I want to develop. I also recognize and understand and have talked about that his role as an edge rusher in this defense is not a straight up pin your ears back and go after the quarterback kind of pass rusher. He had 24 plays in run defense. He had 6 plays in coverage. Like they're moving him around and using him as more of a run stopping and, guy who can drop into coverage. And yeah, as Drew points out, 91.2 coverage grade is wild right now with 6 snaps, but yeah, it makes me wonder if it really shouldn't be an off ball. I mean, I like him as a Mike linebacker off ball, but I think the way they're using him still is a hybrid. I think they're moving him around, right? Thunder saying here, Rallis mentioned they weren't really pinning their ears back because Josh is so mobile. Rams game could be different. Okay, yeah, good point. So Zaven Collins, even with that sack, even if you gave it to him, he still needs to develop that pass rush. Of course, it's he hasn't been that, so it's not surprising that it's a work in progress. So, but he played so well, and he's been so good. And Robert's saying he's a complementary piece, right? And and when Robinson gets back, the defense will look much better in terms of pressure and run defense. I agree with that too. Really need to get him back. So Zaven, though, listen, 85.8 is a really good grade. So setting aside the pass rush thing, listen, I'm glad they signed him to the extension they did. I'm glad he's still around because he is a solid football player. Whether he's a true edge rusher, a Mike, a linebacker, we can quibble about what we call him. But here's what I do know. They used him and he was effective. Maybe he wasn't great rushing the passer all the time, but overall had a solid grade. And on the tape and watching him, he was effective. And he's a good part of this defense. I like him on this defense. Maybe, I don't love the pass rush stuff, but he's doing a lot of other things. And I think he's a player we sometimes forget about when we talk about this defense in terms of, that people talk about how it's lacking talent. Well, he's a talented player. Maybe you can debate whether he's out of position, but I hope he sticks around. Roy Lopez, 84.6. I want to talk about him real quick. That we talked about the interior defensive line. And this was a guy who was a 6th-round pick in 2021 of the Houston Texans. I think we picked him up off waivers, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be wrong. But we picked him up last year. And, he had 395 snaps for us last year, which a nose tackle, that's a solid number. Nose tackles are not, full-time players in terms of, when you go into nickel, they're usually the guy that you bring off the field, right? So he played a good number of snaps for us last year. And had a 65.4 grade, which was solid for us. And this year, this game, 84.6, right? So, Roy Lopez is a guy I like after what we saw last year, and I'm glad he's around and they've talked about him. So now let's kind of go by position a little bit. So we were talking about a couple of highlight players. Let's start with we'll go, just kind of go from the top here. We'll actually look at the linebackers, including the Mikes and the weak side linebackers. So Mac Wilson Jr. we know is great. Chris Barnes, 10 snaps, 62.7, fine. It's an okay grade, right? Then we go down here to the middle linebackers. And this is where we struggled. And listen, the running game was gashing us. And I think this is part of it. It's part the defensive line, but I think Kazir White and Owen Papo struggled, right? Kazir White on 61 snaps, 27.4, right? Now, his coverage grade was really bad. That was a big part of it, right? 27 was there. His 50s in the tackling and the run defense. But he really struggled, right? coming back from injury and stuff, but it wasn't a great game for him. So we hope to see him playing better, right? So let's kind of let's stay in the front. Actually, maybe if we go we're gonna look at the kind of the defensive line, folks. All right, and we'll come back to the secondary after that. Okay, starting down here, let's start with like the defensive line. So defensive right. So these are the defensive right tackle, nose tackle, left end, right end, defensive right tackle. Okay, so let's look at these guys. Bolanek was one of the guys we brought in on 26 snaps. Didn't grade particularly well, right? So he's a rotation guy. Want to see him play better. Collier, 39. That's not great, right? He's a guy that we brought back after he was injured last year. He's kind of, he was a guy that was a first round pick of the Seattle Seahawks. We know his story, and he's kind of been a bust, so to speak, but trying to get his career back on track. Didn't grade particularly well. Justin Jones, other free agent, not great. So we didn't have a great showing from those two guys that we brought in, but Lopez graded really well, like we talked about. Tonga, Chris Tonga, graded really well, 66 on only 16 snaps, right? So he's a rotational guy, but graded well. Dante Still's not great, So the defensive line is really Roy Lopez and Tonga were the ones who played reasonably well. The other folks up there struggled, right? Looking at now the outside linebackers / edge rushers, right? We also already talked about Zaven Collins, right? Overall played well. The pass rush grade wasn't great, but still played well. Gardeck didn't have a great game, right? His pass rush grade was 52.4. We look at going down here to Victor Dimukeshi. He didn't play well either, particularly well, just kind of middling. Xavier Thomas really struggled, right? Thunder saying if Xavier Thomas keeps getting snaps, I bet he gets a lot better. Over time he's going to, no doubt. But this was not a good showing for him, right? Overall. But we knew the edge was a problem, right? That just an area that we know, are they going to bring someone in? I know a lot of people hoping they bring back Reddick. Maybe they bring someone, but I just really think that what they're trying to do is develop the guys they got. And next year, I think our first round pick is probably going to be an edge. We'll see. Ojulari coming back and Robinson. I think they want to develop the guys we have, but we'll see. Whether I'm not saying that is or isn't the right approach, but I think that's what they're trying to do. All right, so let's get into the secondary, okay? So we'll kind of sort by coverage snaps. That'll bring those folks, I think, a lot up here probably. If there's any down here. There's only I'll start with Keitrell Clark. 4 snaps, 77.4. Want to see more from him, right? He played well in a very limited number of snaps, right? But we love Keitrell. He's been up and down last year, right? Then we have Max Melton. He played 11 snaps, struggled a little bit, but he's a rookie. So, that's what you would expect. Now we get to the starting cornerbacks, right? We've got Starling Thomas, Garrett Williams, and Sean Murphy-Bunting. So overall, none of them popped in terms of great grades, but they're all solid, right? Or at least certainly Murphy-Bunting and Garrett Williams in the 60s, solid performance. The coverage grade for Williams, 68.1 is pretty good. Starling Thomas, 57.3. Starling Thomas is a guy they like, right? And he's a guy who he doesn't make big mistakes, it feels like, but he also doesn't pop. And I think they like him because he's consistent and dependable, but and until someone with a little more upside kind of overtakes him, they're going to keep playing him. So the cornerback room, it was okay. It wasn't horrible, right? Garrett, I love Garrett Williams as that slot corner. I think he's a nice player for them. I love the Murphy-Bunting signing. So, certainly no, it's certainly no Marco Wilson. Let's just say it's the play is more competent, right? What we're seeing. The safety play, we love Jalen Buddha. Their grades weren't great. I think a part of that, some of that has to do with how much they are having to cover for other things on the defense, right? And we've talked about in the past, sometimes their assignments are tougher because of what's asked of them, because of what they're able to do. So their grades a little don't do quite as well, right? Real quick, want to say, Raphael, thanks for being here. I'm back. Yes, I am. Good to see you too, right? Appreciate you, my friend. Lance, hey, thanks for popping in. Good to see you as well. Yeah, the D line has more proven upgrades. It will make our secondary look like Pro Bowlers. Yeah, I mean, yeah, if the D line, when we get some upgrade, that's going to help. Those two, coverage and pass rush, are kind of complementary systems, right? They complement each other. So as one of them gets better, the other is going to get better, right? And so as the pass rush gets a little better, it's going to help the coverage, but also vice versa. As the coverage gets better, it gives the pass rush more time. So those things will kind of have a synergy, right? As things get going. Lance saying thought he may become Fox Fan living. No, I haven't. There's with life and everything, I've kind of taken a little bit of a step back and try to find a more manageable balance. But I feel for the Dirty Birds. I pull for them, because of other friends who are Falcons fans, but I'm definitely a Cardinals fan. Drew saying, I agree. I don't think they will bring anyone in. I don't think it's the right decision. It can be demoralizing to locker room. No, you're completely outmatched. Okay, yeah. Raphael saying, I see a lot of good grades in comparison to last year. That's good to see for sure. Yeah, no doubt. So yeah, I think we hit on everyone here on the defense. So when you look at this is kind of the lineups, right? You look at this overall, that offensive line, look how much better that looks. All that green. Think about what we were seeing last year. There was a lot of orange and yellow, right? We're getting a lot more green here, and that just looks much nicer, right? Receivers, we want to see them kind of get improved. Murray, right? Connor's grades are going to go up. This was just a down game, right? McBride's grades going to go up. But I want you to imagine, if you've seen these grades, and last year I used to show these too. Imagine McBride is going to get into the green, right? Connor's going to get into the green. I have to imagine Harrison will at least get into the light green, if not green, in terms of better grade. We'll see where Wilson gets with his grade. If he gets into the 60s, that's going to just be a much nicer offense. So the offensive line just was always so ugly in the past, right? Yeah, we never saw anything like that, right? Yeah, I see that franchise tackle, right? So listen, they've got to keep it going. It's one game, but that's a nice start. Now on the defensive side, there's a couple guys high, but 3 guys with good grades, and the rest of the guys not so much. Let's put this into the nickel too, to get Garrett Williams in there. The defense needs work, and we knew that, right? No doubt. Yeah, very true. We see way more green this versus yellow, orange, red last year. Yep. So it's a nice start, right? Real quick, let's take a look at the Buffalo grades. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. These are the special teams grades: Max Melton, Tip Raymond, Keisha Clark, DJ Dallas, with that return. But Buffalo, on the offensive side, their offensive linemen, Deion Dawkins, they're graded well. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on there. Josh Allen had a 75 grade. James Cook, he was gashing us for a while, 76.4, right? Khalil Shakir, 78, right? A lot of green and yellow. There are a few guys that really struggled for them. On defense, Rousseau, had a heck of a game. Benford, cornerback. Their defense didn't grade particularly well, right? They struggled a little bit, right? So yeah, overall though, there's overall, there's a lot of things to be optimistic about. Yeah, they've got, so New Year, same old defense, but listen, we knew this, right? This was the year to fix the offense. They have added pieces to defense, right? But they've got to develop them. And what I think is going to happen is next year they're going to focus on the defense. We'll probably see a free agent or two on defense next year. We'll see the offense. Hopefully, will be humming, right, doing their thing, right? And next year is the year to be compete and be contenders. I mean, we want them to compete, want them to try to make the playoffs this year. But next year is the year we're looking playoffs. That's, like I said, the 3-year rebuild. It'd be nice if they surprise people and get there. But I like the plan. Yeah, maybe it'd be nice to have another pass rusher in the building, someone who is, and I certainly they didn't expect Ojulari to go down or Robinson. I do think Robinson coming back, and someone I said earlier, is going to make a difference and help. It's not going to, it's still not going to be a great defense this year, but yeah. Mazaki said, don't get me wrong. I always thought this was 6-11 roster this year. I expect them to be better next year. Yeah. I think they could win. I think they'll win more than 6 games, but we'll see. Right. Calvin, thanks for being here. Good to see you. Agree. Thunder agreed. Really want to see Paris grow even more this year. Yeah. PJ, Paris Johnson looking like he never left the left tackle position. Right. Seeing PJJ play so well should help some fans semi-passing on Will, yet I still hear people complaining. Hopefully it stops when D-Rub gets back. 2025 draft supposed to be deep for defenders, so here's hoping, because that's what we're going to need. Robert saying, pin it, bookmark it. Cardinals taking a stud vet edge and then drafting first round edge and DT in round 1. Okay. Yeah, I think next year they're going to bring in some guys with draft and or free agency. So on defense, this year's to fix the offense and to get the young players getting experience. Right. Brandon, thanks for being here. Good breakdown. TCR classic, moral victory. A lot to be encouraged about. I think I agree. And, I know some people don't like moral victories. I'm a big picture process person. And from my perspective, the process is good. I think they're doing the textbook rebuild. Again, you could maybe argue they should have brought in a pass rusher, and I'm not going to argue that point hard one way or the other. I think it was always next year that was going to be, when they're really popping. Michael Evans, lowest paid defense in the NFL. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's a lot of young players, right? A lot of rookie contracts, but yeah. But think about it. Listen, next year you're going to have Garrett Williams, a third year vet, right? You're going to have, Melton, second year vet, right? You're going to have, we didn't see the safety Demerson, right? Rabbit, right? But he's going to have another year in his belt. You're going to see next year, a lot of these guys have more years, and then they're also going to have Ojulari in his third year, right? And they're going to have a second year Robinson. Then they're going to bring in a free agent or two and draft some guys, right? And Drew's saying next year's edge class looks like this year's wide receiver class, super deep, right? So I think it's a good process. I think they're doing the process the right way. Overall, getting the young players getting reps, and next year they're going to kind of really strike, try to really, really hit it hard. So, all right. Well, thank you all for being here. We went through the grades overall, a lot to be excited about, some things that they need to shore up, but I'm excited about this year. I'm glad football's back, and I'm excited to see how they continue to develop and how they fare, as they go through the season and play against, teams that are, some teams that are maybe less of a, elite team or at least, the Bills with their quarterback. That was a tough first week, and they hung in there on the road. So, all right. Thank you all. We'll get out of here. See y'all later. I'm going to throw up my channel member shout outs, and appreciate all of you for being here. We'll see you next week. Peace.